In any negotiation, someone has to go first. Being the first person to go can be a little bit scary and a little bit daunting, but the advantage of that is that you are in control in setting the tone. The ball's in your court. You get to set the standard. You set the tone as far as, are these negotiations going to have a lot of back and forth? Do you have a lot of wiggle room with where your position is and what you're willing to settle for? Or is there not very much room? If you're talking salary, are you going to come in and set the tone at what you really want or a little bit higher? How much wiggle room are you going to have with that? Same thing with buying a vehicle. You come in and you set the tone as far as how much you're willing to negotiate. The disadvantage, unfortunately, is that you risk scaring off the other person by being too firm. You also risk lowballing, leaving things on the table, or being too soft. I recently negotiated terms for a new job position, and my new supervisor asked me to set my expectations for salary, and that was a really tough thing because I wanted to set a firm tone and I wanted to set what I felt like was the high end of my expectations, but I also didn't know where his position was or what kind of range, and so I was definitely concerned about saying a number that was going to just completely turn him off and end the negotiations prematurely. So that's definitely a disadvantage. It's really hard, and that's where you just have to get more practice with it, and it's good to know as much information about the other party as you can going into it. Geographical team distribution. So it's really interesting with a lot of pros and cons for having your team geographically dispersed, having some people in one state and some people in another, in one office, other people working from home. You can span different just physical locations, but that can also become as broad as spanning different time zones and different cultural situations. Well, some of the advantages is that by having your team geographically dispersed, you have a broader span of coverage simply by time zones. I work in Oklahoma on the central time zone. The rest of my team works in Alaska, so they are 3 hours before me. And we support operations that are global. So whereas before, when I worked in Alaska, I might get a call from Guantanamo Bay or from Virginia, and they're 4 or 5 hours ahead of me. Now, when they call me, we're a lot closer in time span. So that's really great. And they really appreciate being able to talk to someone and not having to wait until the Alaska team is in the office. It also means that, I'm done at 6 o'clock in Oklahoma, but the rest of the Alaska team, they're still available for another 3 hours. So that's really great as far as being able to span that. It also ends up being one of the disadvantages, though, because at the same time that we're covering a broader time span, we're also not all on the same shift. We're not all on the same time zone. So it can be a struggle if I finish something I'm doing, or I need to have help from someone and they don't come in until a later time. They don't start until later in the day, whether that's because of time zone or because of um, geographically where they're located, then that means that we have less opportunity for us to work together because we're on the same shift for a shorter period. The other thing that is both a pro and a con is that we have diverse environmental factors. When I'm working in Oklahoma, if there's an earthquake in Alaska, which we had not too long ago, a couple years, and everyone in Alaska was pretty much shut down. The roads were shut down, power, flights coming in and out, all this kind of stuff. And with having team members in a different state, you have some people that can go ahead and still just keep going and at least have a minimum of operations, critical operations continuing to happen, because we're not affected by that in Oklahoma. We're far enough away that it does not impact us other than our teammates. And vice versa, when I'm dealing with weather challenges in Oklahoma, like say having to go to a storm cellar for a tornado, that's not going to happen for my team in Alaska. So I can let them know, like, hey, we've got a storm moving in. I may have to dash out, and this is where I'm at, and there's someone that can pick up and cover for me. And so that's really great. But, again, it's one of those, like, it's a pro and a con because it gives us that advantage. It also means, though, that we don't necessarily have the same appreciation. My teammates in Alaska, they're not familiar with the weather in Oklahoma, so they're not thinking about the same things that I am. And that can definitely be a struggle, because the other thing about that is that it means my manager has to manage different things that we're dealing with. And so there's just kind of this inherent opportunity for disconnect and not having very much team connection. A really good manager can overcome that by, first of all, knowing their team members, talking to them one-on-one, understanding like who they are individually. You can do things like pairing people together based on their location, or pairing like someone who's in Oklahoma with someone who's in Alaska. You can set people in teams and do, even just things that are like little mini competitions. Anything where you have people paired up and they just have an opportunity for a little bit more personal connection. Another thing that can be done is recognizing your team, whether they're in the office or not, making a point to be aware of what they're doing, what they're overcoming, recognizing their anniversaries with the employment group, and then scheduling meetings at a neutral time. Don't schedule your meetings so that one department has to come in at an obnoxious time because it's convenient for everyone else. Find the one that's most convenient for everyone and consider that. It may not be perfect for everyone, but find the one that's the best middle ground for everybody. And then being really consistent and communicating clearly with your team. If you do that with your team, then as a manager, that goes so far with each individual team person and helping them be satisfied in their work, that it's a lot easier for them to have a more cohesive feel and feel connected to the team. Cultural factors. Cultural factors are a really key component to who individuals are at their core, what their core beliefs are, and who they are. And those core beliefs within us define where we're going to be satisfied long term. Are we raised and have a core belief that family is most important and that we're going to strive to support our family and spend the most time with family? Are we raised that we're believing elders are the most important and it's so important for us to do everything during our life so that we can support our elders and have parents live with us? Some cultures that's really key and critical, and others it's not. So you must know what those core beliefs are that make up that person. In a culture that primarily values education and says education is the most important, someone's going to naturally look and believe that education is most important. They're going to naturally strive more towards that. Having an education, being recognized for their education, is going to motivate them. Opportunities for further education are going to motivate them. Same thing with money. If you're raised in a culture, family, area that says money is the most important and your success is defined by how much money you make, or if you hit a certain threshold of your salary, then that's what's going to motivate you and that's what you're going to strive for. You're going to constantly be looking for a bigger salary. If it's titles, then that's what you're going to be looking for. Raising children and having more opportunities. So as a manager, if you don't consider and know what those core beliefs are, what's most important to a person, then you really can't understand what's motivating them, and you can't motivate them. If you go into an organization and you were raised in a culture that puts the highest value on high salary, and so you try to reward your employees with a high salary, but they come from a culture that values time with family, and so they're looking for things like the ability to work from home, flex schedules, being able to leave and take care of their kids when they have to, being able to be flexible and take care of parents. That's what they're going to look for, and they're going to be really disgruntled and frustrated with a manager who tries to just offer them more and more money, because they're going to say no amount of money is worth this. Vice versa, a manager who comes in and tries to offer all kinds of work life, flex schedule, this kind of stuff, To a person who believes their worth is defined by their salary, they're going to be really disgruntled and frustrated with offers of salary, and they're going to, or with these offers of work-life flexibility, because they're going to say, okay, well, yeah, that's great, but you're not paying me enough. So it really kind of just depends on what we were raised and what we believe, how we define success. And that's what we're going to be looking for. So we're looking for tools to help us reach that, whether it's salary, the title, the education, all those kinds of things. As a manager, you just have to have an awareness of that, or you're going to really strike out and be frustrated and frustrate your team when you try to motivate them, because you're motivating them with things that are not motivating to them.